Here we are, coming to you live from the top secret broadcasting bunker here at Area 52. You know who this is. This is Pastor Mike, and I'm online and I'm live with you today. And hopefully there will be no jittering audio effects. There will be no bumps in the road. There will be no computer glitches or video and audio freezes at any time today. I think I finally got it. I think I finally got it fixed. Everything hopefully is working all right. Been using a computer that we had used before, trying to, we used it for our church service streaming, and kept having problems out of it, so we just let it sit for a while, and I thought, well, I'll redo the operating system, I'll clean everything off, start all over again, put Wirecast on it, and was using it up here. And I mean, every time I did something, Pastor Mike Online, we had a problem with it. We had a problem with Tuesday's PMO and with the recording. And it's frustrating because you got to spend all this time now trying to fix it, trying to do this, do that, work it, and everything like that. And so I finally got tired of that and bought a brand new computer. And this thing, it's got it. If you wanted it, this computer's got it. And I did a test yesterday. This is what I did yesterday. I was thinking about recording the next Watchman broadcast. And with all the problems in the Pastor Mike Online issues and things like that, I decided to divert my time and my energy to getting this new computer set up. And I ran some tests yesterday, and I was very, very impressed. And let me just kind of run down what exactly is happening right now. Right now, Wirecast is streaming out. Number one, it's taking in high-definition video from this camera. It's operating all of these background effects that you see over here and all of that stuff. It's taking in the sound. It's mixing it all together. And then it's sending two different streams, both of them to Sermon Audio. One of them is a high-definition stream, relatively speaking. No, it's not 4K video, but it's high definition. And then there is a low definition stream going to Sermon Audio, and this is putting both of those out at the same time. Simultaneously, it is recording two different video files. One is a high definition video file that goes to YouTube because YouTube likes high def, and YouTube watchers like high def. So the lower bitrate stream is going to Sermon Audio. Sermon Audio seems to have a limit on how big the video sizes are. When I do 2 hours worth of video here and send that in, if it's high definition, it's a large file. So I send a lower definition video to Sermon Audio. Those of you who watch us via Sermon Audio, you're watching the recorded file later on, either on your computer, your TV, with a Google Chromecast or any of the other things that you can put in there, or you're watching it on a mobile device, a tablet, a phone, or anything like that. You'll get a lower bit rate on Sermon Audio, and that has an advantage, especially if you are on a metered internet plan, like my phone is, my tablet is, and my internet at home is on a limited bandwidth plan because it's satellite. So anyway, but we tried it. For those of you who want the high def, it's on YouTube. For those of you who need a lower definition, it is on Sermon Audio. By the way, once again, I'll remind you, you can get now a dedicated Bethel Church app, either for your Android phone, your Android tablet, your iPhone, or your iPad. There is a dedicated Bethel Church. It basically is a version of the Sermon Audio app, but it's not. I don't think it's limited to Bethel Church. But when you open it up, it goes right to our homepage. All of the videos, all the audios. You can watch the live streaming via this app. And all you have to do is go to the App Store with Apple, the Google Play Store, and look for the Bethel Church app. It will have a picture of our church. Do not download the anti-Bethel Church in Redding, California. You will get all kinds of junk on your phone. Your phone probably won't live. All right, it probably won't live. It'll have to go through a fire tunnel, and it'll be burned up. Anyway, that was a pretty good one. Anyway, so we're doing all of this live right now, all this stuff that's going on, and the Wirecast gives me a little notification of how much of the computer resources that all of this is using. And Tuesday, using the old rehabbed computer, it was pushing up 80, 90%, sometimes 100%. And I think that's where the problem comes in to the recording file. Right now, I'm doing actually more than I did with the old computer, and I'm still only at about 44%. I think it maxes out at about 45%. So anyway, praise the Lord, hallelujah. Let's get into the day. I'm going to talk about, we were talking about the number 4, the spiritual realm, the fourth dimension. We were talking about that on Tuesday. We're going to pick that up again. We're going to sort of put it in the light of a day that's coming up. In Wicca, in paganism, it is referred to as a cross-quarter day. I shall explain that in due process. A couple of stories that people sent in. There's one of them that's just it's on my cool list. Here's what's going on. A middle school teacher tells the student or students to deny God is real or receive a failing grade. One Texas middle school teacher who has yet to be named is now in hot water for doing just that. According to her, let's see, doing just what? Didn't say. Oh, there it is. Okay. For having their children deny God. Here's what the story says. According to her students from West Memorial Junior High School, they were given an assignment that challenged their faith. Quote, "We were asked to take a poll to say whether God is fact, opinion, or a myth, and she told anyone who said fact or opinion was wrong and God was only a myth. Kids who tried to argue with the teacher were told they would get in trouble, and those who expressed their belief in God for the assignment were told they would receive a failing grade." That's the sound of a failing grade. That's the sound of a good grade. See how it works? All right. Another student asked the teacher if we could put what we believe in the paper, and she said we could, but you would fail the paper if you do. Now, I want you to compare this, analyze this against what we know about the origins of our country. And set your conspiracy theories aside for a minute, because not everything that happened in America from, let's say, 1600 on was part of the Illuminati plan. There was what was called the Great Migration. It was once the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts, that began a migration of Christian people who were leaving England, they were leaving Holland, they were leaving other places. They were coming to this land so that they could worship God the way they saw fit, the way that they felt the Bible was telling them, to believe what they thought the Bible was telling them. A lot of them were of the Puritan, which is, I think, a sort of a Calvinistic type of doctrine and so on. They lived a very restricted lifestyle, but they were simply trying to honor God, and that's what they did. And so the origins of many of our towns, our schools, our universities in this nation were of a Christian origin, and they were based upon, at first it was the Geneva Bible, but as it sort of fell into decay, the King James Bible took over, and that's what the heart of this nation was built on. And so that led, as these men are putting together the Constitution of the United States, they're working on the Bill of Rights. And here is, I can't remember his name, but he's the guy that actually framed the words to the Second Amendment. Congress shall make no law establishing a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Fisher Ames is who came up with that. That was his wording. In other words, Congress shall not pass a law that establishes a state religion of any kind, nor will Congress pass a law that prohibits the free exercise of that religion. Where somebody got separation of church and state out of that, I have no idea. But Fisher Ames, just to let you know what was in his mind, Fisher Ames wrote that he felt that the Bible should be taught in every public schoolroom in America. He said there's no greater English in the world than in the King James Bible. There's no greater understanding of the universe than in the King James Bible. There's no better moral teaching than what's in the Word of God. He said, I think we should use Bibles as textbooks in our schools. That was the thinking. That was not some radical thought. That was not some wacko extremist on the right wing. That was, everybody said, well, yeah, this is a Christian nation. And so now we have a teacher telling the students, I want you to put down whether or not you believe in God, and if you believe in God, you'll probably receive a failing grade for it. The teacher's actions were brought to the attention of the principal by the mother of one of her students, 7th grader Jordan Woolley. The girl has since testified before the school board, who are currently investigating the incident. Jordan is a young lady. You pray for her. She did a brave thing. She stood up against what was going on in her school, stood up for what she believed in, stood up for what is right. And I'm telling you, I think there are still some people in this country that have a little bit of common sense left, that at least know that there's a God. And they believe in this God, and they're not going to let anybody tell them any different. I think there's still some people in this country with some common sense. Now, here's the cool story of the day. This is one I've been waiting on. Scientists invent a tractor beam. You know what that is? No, it didn't come from John Deere, all right? A tractor beam. The word tractor, let's say a tractor. A-T-T-R-O-C-T, attract. A tractor beam, you see it in Star Wars. You'll see it in Star Trek, other space movies. For some reason, there's this universal idea that if we ever invent a spaceship that will warp space and go from one part of the galaxy to the other, that inevitably that spaceship will have a beam that will lock on objects like Botany Bay from the Wrath of Khan and suck it into the ship, and there's no way it can get out of the tractor beam. Scientists have been long able to levitate small objects like drops of water or plastic pellets using only the power of sound. By sandwiching an object between two sets of speakers or a speaker and a reflector, you can send precise, energetic blasts of ultrasonic noise to trap objects midair. But today, a fascinating new breakthrough can now accomplish this odd feat of levitation with a single array of speakers on just one side. It's like using sonic tongs with just one side instead of two. A team of researchers led by Asier Marzo, a software engineer at the Public University of Navarre in Pamplona, Spain, has just created a working tractor beam with sound. The scientists discovered a way to trap, move, twist, and rotate small objects with only a single set of speakers that are silent to the human ear and even work upside down. As the report in the journal Nature Communications, the invention could be used in developing tangible 3D holograms made of tiny particles, or could find a future in acoustic surgery that requires no incision. Did you catch that? Acoustic surgery. We already have the ability to beam sound waves into the womb of a woman. It's called an ultrasound. Ultrasound images in my lifetime, and I made the prediction that at first time I took Lisa to get an ultrasound when she was pregnant with Lindsay, I was looking at that, and they're going, oh, yeah, look at that. And I'm just going, what do you see? I said, a gray mass. I have no idea what that is. Oh, that's the baby. Whatever. But I made the prediction back then that probably in my lifetime, they'll be able to use those things. You see all the facial features of the child. They had that. Now, I was right. I was right. I should get a reward. But anyway, ultrasound does that. Now they're thinking we can use this beam of sound, and without ever cutting the skin of someone, we can do acoustic surgery on someone. By the way, the idea of using sound to attract and lock in on an object is not really all that new. My mother was doing it to me for years. It doesn't matter where I would be. I used to play, we lived in a little rural subdivision. Some people can't say rural. We lived in, and some of you are trying it right now. We used to live in a rural subdivision, played in the woods a lot, rode our bikes on the streets, didn't have to worry about cars running over us and weirdos picking us up or anything like that. And I would play sometimes about 3 houses down, sometimes 5 houses, 6 houses, 7 houses down. And late in the afternoon when it was time, it didn't matter how far away I was from home, my mom would step out on the porch and cup her hands and start going, Michael! Like that. And I would just go, that's my mom. I got to go. Bye. Tractor beam using sound. Been alive and well since the 60s and 70s. Still going on. Here's something that is germane to what we are looking into. Could scientists soon discover a parallel universe? Question mark. New data from the extra-powerful Large Hadron Collider is being analyzed. I don't think that you and I really fully comprehend and know what is going on at CERN. I try to keep up on it a little bit. Some of it is extremely hard to follow. Some of it is just downright, I have no idea what that's talking about. But every now and then, I'll read something or somebody will share something with me and I'll go, oh, look at that. Look, that's what they're doing. Let me read this and I'll tell you another little bit of information that I have that's going to, those of us who believe the Bible, those of us who actually do believe in other dimensions, not just dimensions of sight and sound and mind, but a fourth spatial dimension. Those of us, you say, well, I don't know if I believe that. You believe in a second dimension, don't you? You should. I used this illustration the other day. Put your hand, here, I'll see if I can do it like this, okay? You see my hand here, and you see behind my hand is a shadow. It's touching the page. My hand is not touching the page, but my shadow is. My shadow is two-dimensional. It does not have a raised surface. It is only in 2 dimensions. You can't feel it. Okay? It interacts with a 3-dimensional object in a sort of a funny way, but you can't feel it. It doesn't have 3 dimensions. Doesn't have a surface that you can touch. We are in a 3-dimensional plane, a 3-dimensional universe, so on, so on. There is a dimension outside of that. We're looking into it in the scriptures, and I believe it. And I believe that at some point the dimensions are gonna collide. Here we go. It has found the God particle, but the Large Hadron Collider could soon detect a parallel universe. The atom smasher at CERN in Geneva is now operating at its highest level in a bid to detect miniature black holes. I have those right on the end of my nose. They're really disgusting. Miniature black holes, which are considered a key sign of what's called a multiverse. An interesting movie to watch is, let's see here, The One with Jet Li, because it talks about multiverses and that there is a copy of you in different universes. Jet Li played a character that a bad version of him was hopping into all the different universes and killing his equal. And the idea is that every time he killed his person in another universe, he received their power in him. And the idea was he became stronger and had more abilities and more godlike. They actually brought this out in the movie. And it's now down to there's just a few of him left. There's a good one and a bad one, a yin and a yang. Not kidding you. And that's why the movie is called The One, is because Jet Li's character, one of Jet Li's characters, wants to be the only one of him, but have all of the power that all of the others of him in all these different universes had. All right? That concept is actually part of the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah teaches that there was the one, the singularity, at the beginning of creation, and which is it's basically they're describing the Antichrist, the beast. And when the Big Bang occurred, the Big Bang is a Kabbalah doctrine. It did not originate from science. It originated from Jewish Kabbalah. When the Big Bang occurred and it blew out the one, the singularity, it blew it out in little bitty tiny particles or sparks, and that every one of us has in us that divine spark, that one little piece of the divine. The idea is to bring it all together to make the one, the singularity again, which is the Antichrist. Where was I going with that? It's pretty good. So, it ended up with the good Jet Li and the bad Jet Li. And the good Jet Li gets to go to a multiverse, a different universe that's called, I'm not making this up, it's called Paradise. The bad Jet Li gets to go to, he's put on a prison universe, a prison planet called the Hades universe, which is hell. And so he ends up down there, and the last scene that you see in this movie is the bad Jet Li, who is ascending on top of a pyramid to become the capstone of that pyramid. And I'm just going, That was one of the first movies that this came out in the 90s, and that's one of the first movies that I was just looking at going, are they indoctrinating people with those movies? Because I just think there's indoctrination here. I think there's something going on here. When I saw the pyramid and the capstone, I'm just going, I think I know what that is. And that got me interested in movies. Anyway, let me read this. Talking about parallel universes and different dimensions. Let's see here. The data collected since June is now being analyzed. The experiment may alarm critics who fear the Large Hadron Collider could bring about the end of the world as we know it. But scientists say the groundbreaking experiment could transform our understanding of the universe. I think it's going to transform something. No doubt in my mind. I won't read all of this. I will try to remember to put this on the facebook.com/Pastor Mike Online, but because I want to get into it. But there was something that Jazz actually told me. Jazz, our web mistress, we were talking about the idea of a quantum computer. And if you remember, I talked about this in a Watchman video broadcast. I was trying to study what all this quantum stuff was all about. And it has to do with things that are smaller than atoms. We always thought that atoms were the smallest things in the universe and that the atoms made up everything that is. Atoms made all the elements. There's a hydrogen atom and a helium atom and an oxygen atom and so on and so on. But then they started thinking about, well, if atoms are there, then what are atoms made of? And so they started breaking it down and writing big theorems on chalkboards and running computer simulations and everything like that. Then they got to what's called the quantum world. The word quantum means everything. So this is the theory of everything. This is quantum particles are what makes everything in the universe. Quantum particles are what makes atoms, all right? But quantum particles don't follow the law. They don't follow the rules and the principles of the known universe. Like, if I wanted to go from St. Louis to Dallas, Texas, for some ungodly reason, well, I would go to Dallas, Texas. I would have to travel from here to there, and I would have to occupy all the space between here and there. There is this theory called, I think it's quantum tunneling, whereby a particle that's in St. Louis, if that particle wants to go to Dallas, Texas, it will go immediately to Dallas, Texas, and not occupy any of the space between here and Dallas, Texas. Don't ask me, but that's what they're saying. You know what that sounds more like than anything? It sounds more like what Philip did. When Philip witnessed to the Ethiopian eunuch, and when he was baptized and they both come up out of the water, Philip, it's gone. Next thing he knows, he's in another place, and apparently he was there without occupying any of the space between him and where he went. That's Acts chapter 8. So I'm just going, this is... So anyway, then we get into quantum computers. The computer I'm using right now, even though it's a very high speed, I've got 16 gigabytes of RAM here. I've got a 2 gigabyte video card that's doing all this video stuff. I've got two terabyte hard drives on this thing. And everything on this computer right now, including the image of my face and my sound, is all broken down for the computer in bits of zeros and ones. And that's it. Zeros and ones. 0001 is it's a 4-bit representation of the number 1, 0001. 0010 is 2, and it kind of goes on. But anyway, it's the idea that a switch, back in the old days when they had these massive computers, the switch is on or the switch is off. If it's on, that's a 1. If it's off, that's a 0. These were electric circuits. Electric circuits, not electronic. Electric circuits. After a while, they developed electronic circuit boards so that guys with lab coats were not pulling switches down. They were triggered electronically in this little silicon chip. Anyway, I said all that to say this. A computer right now only recognizes whether or not the switch is on or the switch is off, and it does it at a very, very high rate of speed. Quantum computers can recognize whether a switch is on or a switch is off, or what's called a quantum state of being on and off at the same time. Right over our head. Think of this light. When I come into this room, there's a light switch. When I walk upstairs to our top secret broadcasting facility and I flip that switch, then all the lights in this room come on. And when I leave, I flip the switch off and all the lights go off. That's the universe. That's how it is. One or the other. Think of how God divided the light from darkness. Think about that in Genesis chapter 1. Since we're dealing with the fourth dimension, if you go look at Genesis chapter 1. Because when God initialized the idea of light in this universe, he said, well, go count them. Genesis chapter 1, it was at verse 3. And God said, let there be light. 4. You know what happened? And there was light. Wow. But anyway, and God divided the light from darkness, and the light he called good. The light is good. Light, universally, light is good. Darkness is bad, evil. All the bad guys and all these old dramas and all these old crime stories and cowboy stories, the bad guys always wore black. And the good guys always wore white. That's how it was, all right? They were divided from darkness. What communion hath light with darkness? Well, in the quantum world, it can either be light or darkness or both, where light and darkness commune. They join together. And we go, we cannot even theorize that. We cannot understand that. But that's how it is. So in a qubit, Q-U-B-I-T, quantum bit, the switch can be on or off or both at the exact same time. Jazz, and I talked about that because in Revelation 17, it refers to the beast that was and is not and yet is. It doesn't say the beast that was and right now isn't, but he will be. It doesn't say that. The beast that was and is not and yet is. He is both at the same time. This is part of the understanding of all of these androgynous gods throughout all of history. Dionysus or Bacchus, Baphomet. And when I say androgynous, I mean both male and female. On, off, yin, yang, light and darkness, sons of God, daughters of men. Two universes coming together, two dimensions coming together. That's what a qubit is. And Jazz told me, she said, Pastor, I don't know if you know this or not, but in a quantum computer, when the switch is both on and off at the same time, what they're pretty sure is happening is that another dimension is crossing into our dimension at that time to form a switch that is both on and off simultaneously. And I'm just, I think I know what that is. I don't understand it fully. But I'll give you a little theory I'm working on. Okay? This is top secret stuff, people. I don't want this out all over the internet. Okay? It's just me and you. Okay? They tell us that the quantum particles are the smallest parts of the universe and that everything in the universe is made of these quantum particles, including you and I. Atoms. The atoms that are in my body, that my body is made up of, are made of quantum bits, all right? Or quantum particles. I always look for the Bible, how the Bible would say this, how the Bible would teach this. Because if this is true, then it's in the Bible. And if it's not in the Bible, then it's not true. So my question is this in the Bible? And I think it is. And I'll just give you 2 words to study, all right? The 2 words are dust and ashes. Dust and ashes. What are we made of? The dust of the earth. What do we return to? When this body breaks down, what does it turn back to? Abraham said, I am but dust and ashes. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if your body decays in the ground or it's burned up in a fire. You're back to the very particles that you started out being. And I think that the concept of dust and ashes in the Bible, and the Bible never defines how small dust is, does it? But we know what dust is. Dust is particles. If you live in Oklahoma, Texas, or wherever, there's a lot of wind out there, and there's a lot of dirt it picks up. And if you leave your car windows down all the time, you get in your car, and the dashboard is just full of dust. It's individual particles of dirt that has been blown in by the wind. In your house, when you have to dust your house, and you wonder how in the world does dust get in my house and keep the windows closed all the time and never let the wind in or anything like that? What is this? All this dust? A big portion of that dust is your own skin that's flaking off of you 24 hours a day, and it's collecting you. That's nice, isn't it? But we are made out of quantum particles. We are made out of dust. And so I just encourage you to do a study of dust and ashes in the King James Bible. I have done it. I've done a preliminary study. I've got my notes. I have no idea what it is yet, but there is something interesting about this, and then we're going to get into this fourth dimension. The interesting thing about it is that what does the serpent eat? He eats. God told him he was going to eat the dust. Hey, devil, eat my dust. Been waiting to say that. He eats dust. That's what he consumes, all right? The earth consumes us when we die. It eats away our body. It's corruption and everything like that. So just kind of ponder all of that. It's big stuff. It's big stuff. But I've learned that when you use the scriptures to teach you these things, it's like a whole lot easier because the Bible will give you a way, it will teach you in such a ways that you will understand it. Hence, the fourth dimension, the fourth spatial direction, and we were talking about the fourth kingdom, Daniel chapter 2. I think this fourth kingdom is not made up of humans. Well, they're going to mingle with the seed of men. But the fourth kingdom, it's not the revived Roman Empire. We're not going to have a Caesar Augustus ruling over us. Or what was it, Tim LaHaye? Nikolai Carpathian, the savvy politician that he was that took over the European Union. I don't believe that. I don't see it anywhere. I don't see it in the Bible. I think that fourth kingdom is a kingdom of beasts. It's a kingdom of spirits. I think God is going to allow beasts to rule over man instead of man having dominion over beasts. And I think that they are going to fuse themselves in with mankind. They're going to mingle themselves with the seed of men. When you look at the fourth kingdom in that image that Nebuchadnezzar had, that fourth kingdom was different than the other three kingdoms. It was cheap, number one, because iron and clay are cheap products in the earth. Number two, it was the only part of that image that had a fusion to it. It was that the iron was fused with clay. The brass and the silver and the gold were all pure. They were not mingled with anything. And then you have the same thing in the book of Daniel chapter 7. You have the four beasts that rise up out of the sea. Think about it. By the way, the word sea, write this down. The word sea, S-E-A. In fact, here's what we'll do. I'll show it to you. Let me pull up the King James Pure Bible Search software. I'll type in the word let me sweep it with the besom of destruction here, S-E-A, and hit enter. Exactly 400 times in the King James Bible. Exactly. Okay? So they rise up out of the sea. And you see the first three beasts. The fourth beast is different. He's diverse from the other three. He's not the same as them. And that, plus everything else that I'm showing you, leads me to believe that this fourth kingdom, this nation, I started teaching on that last night in the Wednesday night Bible study here at Bethel. If you have not seen that, it should be uploaded to Sermon Audio now. Right now, all the girls are working on the mail-outs, the Watchers packets that go out at the first of every month. They're trying to get ahead. They're waiting for me to shut up today so they can have this and put it on the Bible study disc. But anyway, Lindsay should have last night's sermon uploaded sometime today, and it's talking about that nation that's going to come up against the people of this earth. And I don't think that nation I don't think it's China. I don't think it's Russia. I don't think it's North Korea. I'm not sure about the Canadians yet, but I'm pretty sure it's not the Canadians, all right? But anyway, I think that nation comes from a different place. And I don't think it's people like you and me. I think it's a different nation. It's a nation of fierce countenance. That means they're mean looking all the time. All right? So anyway, this fourth kingdom is different than the other three. Let's see here. Where were we the other day? Let's see. Oh, yeah. Ephesians chapter 3. Here's the verse that got me started. That Paul talked about breadth, length, depth, and height. He spoke of four dimensions, four directions, four ways to go. And right now, you and I only understand three. We can only conceive in our mind of three. Mathematically, those who do math and those who understand geometry a little bit, or probably a lot, they can write out for you the mathematic equation of what the fourth dimension is and even sort of characterize it in an object. And I'll tell you what that object is, and you've seen it before. You've seen it, okay? You know what it is. But it represents the fourth dimension, the fourth place, the fourth kingdom, as it were. Breadth, length, depth, and height. And we were looking at what the word height meant in the Bible. And it basically is the height of the heavens. So where the third heaven is, and if that throws you off, think of the earth. That's place number 1. The first heaven, place number 2. Second heaven, place number 3. The third heaven is place number 4. All right? In other words, you have the earth and the three heavens above it. And the fourth part of that is the third heaven, and it's way different than the other places. All right, it's where God is. He is in the height of the heavens. In fact, he is the most what? He's the most high. And just remember what the dragon or Lucifer wants to be like. He wants to be like the Most High. We talked about August Mobius, who visualized the fourth dimension as you take a three-dimensional object and turn it into its mirror image by way of rotation. You get what's called a Mobius strip. You see the little ants scurrying along the Mobius strip. At one point, they're on the outside. At one point, they're on the inside. It's like they're both at the same time. That's what a Mobius strip is. By the way, it looks like a sideways 8, which is the infinity symbol. And the infinity symbol, this goes back thousands of years. The infinity symbol was a symbol of like new life, new birth, starting all over again, a loop, as it were, like a time loop or something like that. They made a movie. Who was in this? Bruce Willis made a movie called Looper about a guy who is sent back. Let's see, how does this work? He's in the past, and the mafia in the future have a time machine, and anybody they want killed, they put him in the time machine, send him back in the past, and then the assassin shoots them and takes the gold payment from them, and that way the guys in the future get away with murder because the bodies in the past. It's kind of weird, but the movie is called Looper. That's what it is. And Bruce Willis ends up looping back on himself in order to change the future. Now, I want you to grasp that idea, because we see that in the book of Daniel, the beast seeks to change times and laws. He wants to change times. And you think, yeah, he wants to. He's not going to get away with it. Not so fast. Because it says in that passage that God gives them into his hand. And we have no idea. I don't think you and I can even theorize what that means yet. Because anytime you start talking about time travel and meeting yourself in the past, and it's going to throw off the whole, and you do like the butterfly effect. They say if you go back, 5,000 years and step on a butterfly, the butterfly flaps its wings in Asia, and that sets off a chain of events that ends up in a hurricane in Mexico. It's the idea. It's called the butterfly effect. There's been several movies made. One of them is called The Butterfly Effect. There was a movie, I don't remember if Ray Bradbury wrote this. There was a short story called The Sound of Thunder, and it was about a guy who operates a time machine safari thing. You pay this guy a huge amount of money, and he takes you back to the dinosaur age and lets you kill a dinosaur, all right? I want to get into all that anyway, but that's been written about before, and it's confusing. We just freaks our minds out, and I don't think that you and I can really see nor understand what is going to happen when God gives the beast the ability to change times and laws. I think that there's I don't know how many companies that are using this slogan, this changes everything. I know there's several of them doing it right now. They're talking about a change of literally everything that we know of in this universe. What's going to make that change? This big stuff, people, but we're trying to make it simple so that we can understand it. Then we have a guy named Abbott. He used to hang around with a guy named Costello. He was a Victorian schoolmaster and clergyman who published in 1884 his famous novel called Flatland. It wasn't about a flat earth. It's about two-dimensional creatures called Flatlanders who dare to imagine life in a three-dimensional universe called Spaceland, and even a four-dimensional world called Thoughtland. But you have these guys, and especially in the 1800s now, they're thinking this way. They are theorizing what it would be like. Then you have Charles Hinton, who wrote a book called A New Era of Thought, and a book called The Fourth Dimension. In 1904, he theorized that the three-dimensionality of space is a necessary condition of man's consciousness. However, it is necessary only to normal awareness. Altered states of consciousness, such as those experienced by mystics and psychics, acquired four-dimensional perspectives. Think about this for a minute. Think about the Jewish mystics. Think about contemplative prayer. Think about Ignatian contemplation. Think about yoga and all of these occult practices. Think of, and anybody that has ever looked into altered states of consciousness. There's a book I read, I can't remember which one it was, but a guy was talking about 2 ways to get your mind warped into an altered state of consciousness. The first way was through techniques of meditation, of emptying your mind, repeating a mantra and so on over and over until your mind was pretty much empty of just about everything. And then all of a sudden now that was the doorway into this other world, all right? The other way was to use drugs like LSD. We know that, who was it, Crick or Watson? One of those two, I cannot remember, one of those two who discovered the look and shape of DNA, they were taking small amounts of LSD because the picture of DNA that they were trying to find out was behind a locked door. And they were looking for a way to open that door. Jim Morrison named this is a Aldous Huxley idea, that there is a doorway to a massive understanding, a massive new way of thinking, and that doorway is locked. And in our normal three-dimensional thought process world, consciousness, sobriety, the Bible calls it, in our sober world, we cannot see what's behind that door. And so Huxley was a drug user, and he was taking LSD, and he was opening the door. Back in the heyday of the 60s and 70s, when LSD was, it was the drug, you had a lot of rock stars taking LSD. They would take LSD, their mind would go into this other universe, and they were writing lyrics down about stuff that when you come down off of it and you're reading it, you're going, what in the world does that mean? But when you're high on LSD and you have and the door's open to the other dimension, it just, for some reason, it makes perfect sense. Okay? The tie-dye T-shirts that people wore, still do, that basically was that when people were on LSD or other mind-altering drugs, that's similar to what they would see in there. I can tell you, I don't know what it means. When I was being electrocuted back in 2006, what I heard in my ear was the 60 hertz per second electricity going through my body. I could hear that. It's a low hum, like a hum on a guitar amplifier. That's what I heard in my ears, magnified probably about 100 times. What I saw in my eyes was all these multi-colors like a tie-dyed T-shirt. Telling you, that was rough, all right? But anyway, the idea is that there is a door. Jim Morrison named his rock group called The Doors after what Aldous Huxley proposed, is that we need to alter our consciousness so we can open this doorway to this fourth dimension, because there's a door there and it's locked. I want you to take that and ask yourself, is there something in the Bible about this, about something that's locked and we can't get to it, and if we open it, it will bring about a whole new world. Yeah, it's called Revelation 9, the fifth trumpet. You go study that. That's that consciousness right there, all right? Let's see here. Here is what Hinton, this guy here, he looks like a hippie already. 1904. He's a 1904 hippie. All right, kind of looks like what was the guy from Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead. Anyway, here is what's called Hinton's tesseract. It's a cube within a cube. When the tesseract is rotated, the inner cube comes out and vice versa. Now, don't ask me how to explain that. It's just that's what it is. And you're saying, a tesseract. It seems like I've seen, yes, I have seen movies with that in it. I want you to look at, of course, there is the Captain America one, Thor. Let's see. Yeah, Thor, the Avengers, Iron Man. They all are looking at this tesseract. It's like the portal to another dimension. When in the Avengers, they use the tesseract in order to open up a portal so that all these aliens can come through it and try to take over planet Earth. All right, and the Hulk stops them, and Iron Man saves the day, and all this stuff. I want you to look at the imagery here. This is Loki from, what is it, Scandinavian Theology, Norway, Denmark, places like that. This is Loki. And I want you to notice that the cube or the tesseract actually forms a hexagon. Okay? That's the idea. That's part of it. Is that a cube will have how many sides? How many sides does a cube have? And if you say 4, I'm going to go, cube does not have 4 sides. Cube has 6. Okay? Then we have Charles Dodgson, also known as Lewis Carroll. Charles Dodgson was a mathematician and sort of a pedophile, if you ask some people. And he wrote all these books under the name of Lewis Carroll, one of which was Alice's Adventures Through the Looking Glass. And when Charles Dodgson wrote this book, it was his theories about how someone would go from the 3-dimensional world into the 4th-dimensional world. Remember, we talked about the mirror the other day, and that if you raise your right hand in the mirror, the guy on the mirror raises his left hand. And there's no way around that, all right? So anyway, it's the idea that you go through a mirror to get into this 4th-dimensional world. Speaking of LSD and rock and roll songs, who was it? Grace Slick of Jefferson, was it Jefferson Airplane? Then it was Jefferson Starship. But anyway, I think while they were Jefferson Airplane, Grace Slick, they sang a song called Go Ask Alice. All right? And I don't remember all the lyrics from that, but it basically was about going into a different dimension. In the first installment of The Matrix, Neo is told to follow the White Rabbit, and there's this rave chick that's got a white rabbit tattoo on her shoulder, and so he follows her. And just before Neo is about to be awakened to the fact that he's inside of a computer-generated matrix world and that his body is in this pool of goo where they're keeping him alive and sucking all of his electricity out of his body, the machine world is, right before Neo wakes up, there's a mirror sitting next to him. And as they're trying to locate where his body is in the machine complex, and he touches the mirror, and all of a sudden him and the mirror fuse. And then the mirror begins to creep over his body and inverts, and he's now inside out, and he's actually going to enter in a new world. He's having an awakening because he went through the mirror, just like, see, the Wachowski brothers, buddy, if that was an occult concept, they used it in The Matrix. Now, there's something interesting about this. Is that, and I'll read this verse in a little bit if we get to it. The Bible describes the barrier between us and God as a molten looking glass, as not a real looking glass. But it describes it as a molten looking glass. Very, very, very interesting. All right. And Dodgson, I think Dodgson knew that language. I think that's why he wrote about Alice Through the Looking Glass. Anyway, then we have H.G. Wells. And all of these guys are sort of building on one another. Hinton, and then you have Dodgson, and then you have H.G. Wells, who writes The Time Machine. And here is this guy in The Time Machine who has the ability to go backwards and forwards in time by bending space and time and warping it so that he can travel through it as someone goes through a tunnel. And then you have the Russian mathematician Hermann Minkowski, who developed the idea of what's called the four-dimensional space-time continuum. And the idea is that space and time, three-dimensional space and time that you and I live in, are linked together. They're inseparable. To escape one is to escape the other. And those of you who have watched, I don't know, Star Trek, there was a show in the 90s, you remember this one, called Quantum Leap? It's about a guy who's traveling back and forth in time and being inside other people's bodies. That's just weird. But anyway, that's where that concept came from. Then we have Einstein. His theory of relativity is that energy, and what energy is equals matter times the constant speed of light squared. Don't ask me to explain much more than that because I don't get it. But the whole idea of a fourth dimension is the basis for quantum physics, because these quantum particles can be in two forms at the exact same time. Scientists thought that light was in waves, and you have light waves coming from the sun. But then they found out that light was also in particles called photons. And they cannot explain how light can be both a particle and a wave at the same time, but it is. Just like with quantum tunneling, you have a quantum particle in St. Louis, and it wants to go to, wants to go to Mardi Gras. And so in the blink of an eye, it is in St. Louis, and then it is in Mardi Gras, and it never occupies the space between those two. It doesn't follow the rules of physics. And I believe with all my heart, just based upon the science of what CERN is doing, because they keep talking about time travel. And they're quick to say, now, that doesn't mean that we're trying to build a time machine that we can get in and go back and forth and change this and look at ourselves and all this and play the stock market so that we're rich now. Doesn't mean that. But what if they find out that they can actually do it? And they find out they can actually change times and laws. Now we're thinking like the beast is going to think. And God, for whatever reason, God is going to give those into his hand. So here's the basic ideas. I'm studying the Word of God, and I realize there's 4 directions given to me in the book of Ephesians. And so I want to know what the 4th dimension is. So I start doing a little research on the internet and look it up. Here's what it is. A 4th spatial direction that we cannot currently perceive or point to in our 3-dimensional space. I have no idea what direction it is. I can't point. Maybe it's all directions all at once. Maybe it's that. I don't know. A 4th dimensional object is not bound by 3-dimensional space. Okay? Let me give you this example. Let me zoom in here on my person. Okay, watch this. Okay, here's hand A, and here's I don't know how I can do this. Okay? Okay, you see the shadow on this hand here, of this hand. There we go, like that, okay? My hand here, even though the shadow of this hand is falling on this hand, my hand is 3-dimensional, my shadow on it is 2-dimensional. My hand does not have to stop when it reaches the shadow of this hand. Does that make sense to you? In other words, the 2-dimensional shadow of this hand does not in any way alter or inhibit or prohibit this hand from moving through it? Is there something that Jesus did when he was on this earth and the crowds were trying to get him, and he just walked right through them, didn't he? After his resurrection, he just appeared in the room with the disciples. He was walking with the guys on the road to Emmaus, and he sits down to eat with them, and all of a sudden, poof, he's gone. Philip, coming up out of the water after baptizing the eunuch, gone. It's like this three-dimensional world had no boundaries to him whatsoever. There's another story. I'm hanging on to it, all right? Number 3, upon entering the fourth dimension, you become your opposite or your mirror image. Hang on to that one. Number 4, the barrier between dimensions is likened to a mirror or a water surface. You can't see that on the screen, can you? Hang on, let me put it up here. Here we go. Watch this. There is, speaking of Halloween and cross-quarter days and so on, there is a practice in witchcraft called scrying. S-C-R-Y-I-N-G. You can look this up. Do an image search of a scrying bowl. Because a witch or a Wiccan who is scrying, John Dee did this. He was in contact with beings from another dimension that were trying to teach him a secret language called Enochian language. It's a language, get this now, Enochian language is a language that nobody on the earth can speak. In Deuteronomy 28, God told Israel that if they didn't follow his laws, that he would send them a nation from afar, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. And here's John Dee, and he's scrying, and he's in contact with these entities, aliens, these people from another dimension, and they're telling him exactly that they speak an angelic language. Where have you heard that before? They speak an angelic language that no human can understand. Where have you heard that before? You've heard that from the people who teach unknown tongues, because they're saying, I'm speaking the tongues of angels, and nobody can understand it. I want you to ask yourself this question. Every time in the Bible, when an angel is speaking, everybody understands it. The two angels that were with Jesus in Genesis 18, in Genesis 19, when they show up to Lot, Lot can understand every word they say. He understands I don't know if they had an accent, but he understood every word they said. Daniel had angels visit him, and he understood every word they said. The Virgin Mary was visited. Elizabeth was visited by the angel Gabriel, and she understands every word he says. Even Micaiah, the prophet who was brought before Ahab and Hezekiah, and they asked him what he saw, and he said, I saw God sitting on his throne. And he said, I saw all these spirits there. And God said, who will go and deceive Ahab for me? And this spirit said this, and this spirit that said that. And this spirit finally said, I'll go. And God said, wherewith? In other words, how will you do this? And he said, I will go and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all the prophets unto Ahab. And God said, go do it. And Micaiah understood every word they said. John understood what the four beasts were saying in Revelation chapter 4. And I'm just telling you, there isn't one place in the Bible anywhere where you see angels speaking a language and no one understands it. Not one. There is, however, an interesting, and I'll get back to scrying in a little bit. I'm like chasing rabbits on this thing massively, all right? But anyway, there is a part of God's creation that speaks a language that no human can understand. There is. Birds, wolves, dogs, lions, elephants, monkeys, dolphins, whales. God gave them a voice. And those voices are communicating. Turkeys, deer in the woods, God gave them a voice. Little bitty cows, calves out in the field, when they start mooing for mama, mama knows, mama understands that. They can understand it. We can't. And so here's John D. He's using a scrying bowl, which is a reflective surface. And what he's doing, he's looking into a different dimension. That's why the sea, I think, is a representation of that dimension in the heart of the earth. It's like looking into a mirror, all right? But anyway, that's the concept. The fourth dimension is like the barrier is like into a mirror or water surface. A fourth-dimensional object casts a three-dimensional shadow. Just like I showed you, my three-dimensional hand casts a two-dimensional shadow. So let's look at some things that are germane to this, all right? So first, we know that place is up. Mark 16, he was received up into heaven. Acts 1:9, he was taken up. 2 Kings 2:11, Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven, all right? So it really is the height. It is up. It's how it's described in the Scriptures. It's not bound by a third dimension. Here is the fourth. I love the language of my Bible. I don't want anybody to mess my Bible up and change the words in it. I don't want that. The fourth is like the Son of God. And the fourth in that fiery furnace is different than the other three. And yet you have four now in the fiery furnace. And ask yourself the question, did the fire have any effect on them? No. And God prophesied that. This is in, I think, Isaiah. I can't remember where it is. But God said, you shall pass through the fire and not be burned. How is that possible? These people were in a different dimension. They were in that fiery furnace, and it had no effect on the fire was so hot, it killed the guys throwing them in there, but it didn't touch them. And when they came out, they didn't even smell like smoke. Unlike a lot of us who, when we go into the gas station in the morning, we come out, it's like we smell like a whole pack of Camels. But anyway, it had no effect on them whatsoever. And your key here is that number 4 in that story. And let me expound on this just a little bit and make it practical. You will go through fiery trials in this world if you do not have the Son of God with you. You will be scorched. But if he is with you, and he promised he would never leave you nor forsake you, if he is with you, you will pass through the fire and you will not be burned. Somebody say amen. Mark 16, verse 12. After that, he appeared in another form unto two of them. Look at that. As they walked and went into the country, and they went and told it unto the residue, neither believed they them. Luke 24, and it came to pass as he sat at meat with them, he took bread and blessed it and brake and gave it to them, and their eyes were open, and they knew him, and he vanished out of their sight. Boom, gone, just like that. It's like quantum tunneling. He was here, and then he's there, and he doesn't occupy the space between any of those places. Matthew 14:20. Look at this. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. Do you understand that? Isn't that neat? The Bible's giving you the number, the fourth watch of the night, and here is Jesus now not having the three-dimensional laws of physics having any effect on him whatsoever. He's walking on the water. You and I can't do that because this three-dimensional world and gravity and everything else has an effect on us, but it did not affect. And Peter, for a while, Peter did it. Until what? He quit believing. Now, look at this mirror. Remember the mirror that Alice went into. Remember the mirror that Neo goes into. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13, "For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known." It's not until we get to the other side of the glass that we'll really see all the things that right now we don't see nor understand nor comprehend. We shall know, even as also I am known. 2 Corinthians 3:18, "But we all with open face, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image from glory to glory, even as by the Spirit of the Lord." Now let me try to explain that a little bit. The glass is referring to is a mirror, a looking glass. And remember what I said, when we look into a mirror, we're seeing our opposite. And that's what Paul said, we all with open face, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord. That's not who we are right now. That's who we will be. And we will be changed into that same image from glory to glory. You know what that means? Remember when Paul was teaching about the law and Moses, and he talked about the glory that was on Moses when he comes down from Mount Sinai, and the glory was so great that his face was shining and they couldn't even stand to look at him because his face was so bright. And he said, if that back then, which was the law of sin and death, had glory in it, how much more glory will the real Jesus have when he returns again? And that's just the gist of it, but if you go read that, you'll see it in there. So there is one glory of the Old Testament, but there is a greater glory of the New Testament. We talk about the glory of the Lord being sometimes in our church services. We have the glory of God in us right now. God made us in his image. That's one glory. But we are going to be changed to a greater glory one of these days. In 1 Corinthians 15, he talks about there is one glory of the sun and one glory of things that are on the earth. There's bodies celestial, the bodies terrestrial. The bodies terrestrial have one glory. The bodies celestial have a higher glory. And we are going to be changed into that greater glory by the Spirit of the Lord one of these days. The Spirit of the Lord is the Word of God. So then, look at this. Job 37:18. Here's where it's interesting. This is what, when I realized that the fourth dimension was like going into a mirror. Job 37:18. "Hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong, and as a molten looking glass." When you and I pass from this world, we're going to meet Jesus in the air, and we are going to pass from this world to the next world, literally by going through the barrier of the sky, which is as a molten looking glass. Ezekiel chapter 1, "Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of four living creatures." You have the four beasts, and if you look in Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 22, "And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature was as the color of terrible crystal stretched forth over their heads above." And that terrible crystal that Ezekiel saw was referred to as the sea of glass like unto crystal, where the throne of God sits. In other words, the barrier between us and God's throne is like a sea, molten looking glass, a mirror. The water has a reflection just like a mirror does. This is like the word, I mentioned the word sea being 400 times in the King James Bible. "Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea." And I don't think that these four winds, in fact, it tells you right there, the four winds of the heaven. It's telling you right there that these winds are not just the regular wind that blows here. I think these are in a higher plane. They strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. When you think of the fourth kingdom, and you think of the four beasts and where they come from. They come up from, like Jesus said in Matthew, when Jonah was in the whale's belly, he literally said in Jonah chapter 2, the belly of hell. That's what he said. While he went down into the depths inside that whale, and he's literally crying out to God from the belly of hell itself. And when Jesus talked about that, he called it the heart of the earth. Why is that significant? 1, 2, 3, 4. The heart of the earth. This body is made of earth, and it has a heart in the middle of it. And that heart has 4 chambers. 3 of them are similar. 1 of them's different. One of those chambers takes the good oxygenated blood and pumps it into the body. Just think about this. Think about this in church terms, all right? That's what that does. Take a look. Okay, here we go. Here's what I want to do. I want to kind of change keys just a little bit. How can I do this? Let's see here. I don't know how to do it. Anyway, let's read this verse. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of any holiday or the new moon or the Sabbath days, which are a shadow, look at there, a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. Remember what we said about a 3-dimensional object, it casts a 2-dimensional shadow. Therefore, a 4th-dimensional object would cast a 3-dimensional shadow. So when the Bible uses the word shadow, I don't think it's speaking in metaphors and, well, that was an ancient Greek expression that they used and blah 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 blah. The stuff that you would never know if you didn't read if you only read the Bible. I think it means something, and it means exactly what it says. It says that the Sabbath days from the Old Testament, the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Tabernacles, all of those were only a shadow of what's real. I did an interview last night with Sheila Zielinski, and we were talking about All Hallows Eve, and we were talking about these different days that witches and pagans and all of these other things that they have, and I mentioned the Hebrew roots people and Jim Staley, who made the statement. I believe that this is what he said. He referred to observing times, and he said, I believe when we observe times in Yahweh's calendar, God does something special with us that he doesn't do any other time. And here the New Testament is teaching us that all of those, the Passover was a shadow or a foreshadow of something to come. And here is Paul teaching us. If you ask me, Pastor Mike, how come you don't keep the Passover? I will say to you, well, I do, as a matter of fact. I keep the feast, just like Paul said, and I keep it with the unleavened bread of truth, which is the Word of God. Every time I read my Bible, I'm doing what Jesus said, take and eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. This is the bread from heaven. My King James Bible is the unleavened bread. It's unleavened because it doesn't have any corruption in it. Somebody say amen to that. But I want you to think of all these regarding and observing all of these days and how the Bible said that they were simply a shadow and not the real thing. He says, let me go on with this just a few more minutes. In Hebrews chapter 8, verse 4, For if he were on the earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law. Think about this. Roman Catholic priests still to this day crucify Jesus every time they celebrate the Mass. Every single time. They're crucifying the Son of God afresh and bringing him to an open shame. This is reason 4,827 why you should not be a Roman Catholic. Christ died once, the Bible says, and I'm fine with that one. Amen. I would not sit through a church service. I've been at a funeral where they did it, but I would just not go to a normal church service where they're going to crucify Jesus right in front of me all over again. That's a mockery of the cross. What? That gets me. But anyway, here are priests in the Old Testament that offer gifts according to the law, who serve unto the example and what? Shadow of heavenly things. See, the Bible's telling you right there that the things up in heaven, Jerusalem, above, how's that built? Foursquare. And by the way, for all of you Larkin readers, the city of God in heaven being built foursquare is not a pyramid. And there are people who believe that it is. Larkin said it was. Larkin said the Great Pyramid in Egypt was actually built by the Jews as a temple of God because it shows the what Jerusalem in heaven looks like. And I'm just going, no, I don't think so. Pyramids are not four square. They're not. They're four triangles. They are not four square. And I'm not trying to play with words either, but that's what four square is. It is a city that is even this way, and even this way. In every way, it's all the same, no matter how you look at it. It's a city built foursquare. But anyway, here's the city built foursquare up in heaven, and it casts a shadow on this earth. And the shadow that it casts is a three-dimensional shadow. So here you have priests down on the earth. Do we have priests up in heaven? Sure we do. We have the order of Melchizedek. We have an angelic order of priests. In Revelation chapter 8, there is an angel who gives attendance to the altar there in the tabernacle of God. And whatever a priest did here on this earth, there are angels who have that same ministry and that same office, Jesus being the high priest. Now, here's something that's really cool. The priests from this world came from the third tribe of Jacob. You have Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. That was the Levite priesthood. Jesus did not come from Levi, so therefore he is not a priest of an earthly tabernacle. He came from Judah, who's the fourth son of Jacob. He's from a different priesthood, isn't he? He's not from the shadow priesthood. He's from the real priesthood, the order of Melchizedek. And I love this. For the law having a shadow of good things to come and not the very image of the things. Look at the shadow of my hand. The shadow of my hand is not my hand. Therefore, the Old Testament law system is not the real. It's only the shadow, the foreshadowing. You've read books where there was foreshadowing. There was one that, I don't know if you took a literature class in high school or college, and they were teaching you foreshadowing. There was a short story you probably read called An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Some of you may remember that. I remember reading it. I don't remember what the story was, but there was foreshadowing all through that little short story. Okay? And that's in your Bible. Everything that you have in the Old Testament. David and Goliath. Guess what? It's a foreshadow of things to come and not the very image of the things. Always keep that in mind when you're reading your Bible. And when these Hebrew roots people come after you, or these Seventh-day Adventists come after you with law keeping, telling you that's the only way to really please God. And you have to observe times on Yahweh's calendar or you're not pleasing God. Just tell them, excuse me, but those are only a shadow. And if you're asking me if I'm hungry and I say yes and you offer me the shadow of a hamburger, I'm probably going to knock you out and eat your hamburger. You cannot eat the shadow of a hamburger or a pizza or lo mein or chicken fried rice or barbecued beef. Or I better get off that. But anyway, you cannot eat the shadow of food. You have to eat the food. We're not meant to live by the shadow. We're meant to live by the real. So the law equals the Old Testament. It's the shadow. It's earthly things. The New Testament represents heavenly things. And the Old Testament always points you to 4 books in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to see if I can, if I can fast forward in this presentation to, where is it? Hang on here. Yeah, let's do this. Let's I don't know if it'll do it. Hang on here. This is PowerPoint 2016, and I don't know how to use it yet. Hang on here. Maybe we're close. Here we go. Think about that number 4 and the 4 base pairs. All right? Just kind of think about that for a while. Let me get to where I'm going here. We're going to talk about what Halloween is in the time that we have left. Let me do... I should have put this somewhere else. I don't know. In the old PowerPoint that I had on here, there was a feature where I could see all the slides and sort through them all at once. And I don't know how to do that in this new version. All right. Remember the 4 living creatures in Ezekiel chapter 1. Those 4 living creatures are used heavily in the occult. Here's an old Masonic emblem from an old book. You can find this on Google Books. I forgot what the name of it was. But an old Masonic emblem of these 4. These are the 4 creatures, the 4 living creatures that are seen at the throne of God. Here's the Ark of the Covenant. This would be the throne of God. Royal Arch Masonry. And Masonry itself is all about the 4th kingdom, the throne of God, and who's going to have custody over the throne of God. These 4 living creatures represent the 4 chambers that are in your heart, where the throne of God is, because around your heart is a sea of water. It's called the pericardium. It is a sack of salt water that surrounds your heart and actually kind of protects it. It's like shock absorbers for your heart. When they drove the spear into Jesus' side, I think likely they pierced the pericardium and the heart, because the Bible says that what issued forth was blood and water. All right? So think of this. Think of these 4 creatures. Think of your heart, 4 chambers. Think of principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, and spiritual wickedness in high places. Think about that. When we get into the time of year that we are now, let me say this. There are some people who have done a lot of research into Halloween. I have, in years gone by. And there are a lot of stories out there. I think some of them are true. I think some of them might be fudged a little bit. But who am I to say? What I want to show you is that there are days of the year that are very, very, I'm going to use the word sacred, but that doesn't really mean that it's holy. They're held in high regard or high esteem by those who practice Wicca, paganism, pure raw Satanism, New Age doctrines, and so on, and followers of Beth Moore. Not making that up. I dealt with that probably about a year ago, where Beth Moore led everybody. She was having this little prayer service, and she was leading everybody. Now face east, now face south, now face west, now face north. That's what Wiccans do, and there's a reason why they do it. Paul said in Galatians chapter 3, verse 1, "O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you?" And I always thought that word there was interesting. Why did Paul use that particular word in the book of Galatians? Number one, he knew who he's dealing with. He's dealing with Jews. He's dealing with Jewish proselytes who want to try to go into the churches and convince everybody that they need to be keeping the law or they're not really saved. If you don't follow the Old Testament, if you don't get circumcised, even circumcision is a shadow of things to come, but it's not the very thing. And Paul taught this in Romans, earthly circumcision. So what if you're circumcised? If you go out and commit adultery or steal or lie or kill, it's as if you're uncircumcised. Your circumcision doesn't do anything for you as far as proving that you're a child of God. Not that kind of circumcision. But the real circumcision is the circumcision of the foreskin of what? The heart. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get it? And so Paul uses this terminology of bewitching them. And he says, "This only would I learn of you, received you the Spirit by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith." Which is it? How are we saved? By doing works, or are we saved by hearing and believing what we hear from the Word of God? Faith cometh by hearing, hearing by the Word of God. They're linked together. How are you saved? How are you remaining saved? How is it that salvation is being kept in you? By God's grace through your faith. It is not by your works, either good or bad. And so Paul, knowing these people and knowing the spirit behind them, because Jewish Kabbalah is essentially another form of witchcraft. It says, perform this, do this, perform these rituals, have this Shekinah Vulcan blessing on you where you've got 3 over here and 3 over here. That's bad. But that's what the Jewish rabbis do. That's why Leonard Nimoy used that in Star Trek. I believe he had a spirit on him. He was a Kabbalist. There's no doubt in my mind about it. And I've seen some of these so-called Christian messianics do that. Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, there's a picture of him on the internet getting everybody the Vulcan nerve grip, the Shemitah blessing or whatever it is. He's giving them that sons of God, daughters of men blessing. Stuff ain't right. It's a form of witchcraft is what it is, because it requires works. It requires a ritual. It requires doing this in this direction, saying this in this direction, and so on. And it's witchcraft. And Paul said it right. Who bewitched you that you should not obey the truth? Paul knew that the people that had come into those churches had brought in witchcraft, and that they had cast a spell or a curse amongst the people in that church. And Paul said, I want them cut off from among you. You know what the newer translations say there, where Paul says, I would that they were even cut off from you? The NIV says, I wish they were emasculated. In other words, having their cut off. That's not what Paul said. That's vulgar. That's wicked. Anyway, it was bewitching. And Paul was dealing with witchcraft in that church, and he knew it. So he says in Galatians 4, howbeit then, when you knew not God, you did service unto them which by nature are no gods. You did service to false gods. When you serve like God tells them not to worship and serve the stars of heaven. What does that mean? Astrology, what does that mean? When you serve the stars, that means that what they tell you to do and who they tell you you are, that's who you are and that's what you do. I would say that the astrology industry in this country is a multi-million-dollar industry. astrology books, astrological websites, people who can read your charts, who can cast a astrological chart about you and your life, and this is how it's going to be here next year. And you're a Sagittarius, and you shouldn't marry. You should have never married that Cancer. You should have married a Gemini. Now go divorce her and go find you a Gemini, and do this and do that and on and on and on. And you go do whatever the stars tell you to do. That's serving those stars. And Paul said, before you knew God, you served these false gods. And you served these false gods by way of ritual, by way of works, by way of offerings. You had to give offerings. You had to give either money, you had to give part of your cattle or whatever it was. You had to do that with these gods in order to get their benefit from yourself. I'm dealing with the idea of making your children pass through the fire. And people willingly had a priest toss their baby into the fire for Molech so that their crops would produce well that season. I cannot, and by the way, the same thing's still happening, and I am going to deal with this in the Watchman broadcast. When these people go get abortions that are the result of a non-life-threatening issue. In other words, when the child simply isn't convenient, and it benefits the mother and the father in a way that if they kill their child, then their life will be better. They're offering their children as sacrifice unto Molech so that their lives can be better. Abortion makes me mad with anger. I cannot believe we live in a country where we sacrificially and ritualistically kill, how many now? 50 million? American citizens have died and had their rights and their constitutional freedoms taken away from them, been murdered legally in this country. And then we get into the issue of their body parts being sold and used in stem cell lines, in cell lines that are used for research, cell lines that are used to research flavor enhancements, cell lines that are used to research the effects of certain vaccinations. And I'm just going, we're pagans. We have our minds chafed in this country like beasts. We see our own children brutally murdered, and we think, oh, okay, supper time, let's eat them. That's what animals do. That's not what humans are supposed to do. Well, it makes me mad. But he said, but now after that ye have known God, or rather are known of God, how turn ye again to the weak and beggarly elements? Earth, air, fire, and water. 1, 2, 3, 4. The four elements represent the fourth kingdom. They represent the spiritual world, because with every element there is what's called a watchtower. Yeah. That's, I think, where Charles Taze Russell got the idea of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. It's witchcraft. His tombstone is a pyramid with a big capstone on it. That's Charles Taze Russell. But anyway, the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, I think are representatives of the fourth kingdom. They are representatives of principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. And then he said, you turn again to the weak and beggarly elements. And I want you to, man, I could just go. I wish I had about 4 more hours to take you through all this today. I think I'd have a good time, but I'm wore out already. You guys pray for me. Continue to pray for me. I'm tired. I need a break. It's going to come during deer season. I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you when I get back. But the idea of the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, being these principalities and powers and rulers of darkness and spiritual wickedness in high places, and you turn again to those weak and beggarly. They're weak because God's more powerful than that. And if you really want something, you don't have to do witchcraft. You don't have to go to the elements. You don't have to face the four cardinal directions. All you have to do is ask God. You can ask God laying down, standing up, kneeling, on your face, on your back, facing whatever direction you want to. You can call upon God, and God doesn't care about the position of your body or your mouth when you pray the prayer. They're beggarly elements because they make you beg. You have to invoke them. You have to wake them up, because when these elements, and they have these watchtowers, those watchtowers are spirits. And those spirits take the form of dragons. Think about that. And these dragons are all asleep. And you got to be careful how you wake them up, because if you wake them up too quickly, they're going to be mean and they're going to consume you. That's the belief in Wicca. And so they go to the weak and beggarly elements, and then they say, you observe days and months and times and years. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the observing of times, strictly forbidden by God in the Old Testament law. The observance of days and months and times and years. We must do this particular ritual on such and such a day. We have to do this, and we have to face in the four directions, and we have to invoke the sacred name of God, which, by the way, has 4 Hebrew letters. That's why in the occult, in Masonry, in Rosicrucianism, in the New Age movement, in Wicca, in Satanism, the Yod-He-Vah-He is such a sacred word to them because it has 4 letters. And it represents the 4 elements. It represents the 4 spirits, the 4 parts of the spiritual world. It represents the 4th kingdom. And it's the magical word. If you say it the correct way, then you're going to have the power of the magic. And that's witchcraft. Wiccans gather together. And when they do, especially when there's 4 of them, they will perform this ritual of facing the 4 directions. They will do it 4 times a year in honor of the 4 elements, or the 4 watchtowers, or the 4 spirits. And the 4 days that they do this on, number 1, the spring equinox. That is the idea of the yin and yang, or the balance, the fusion of opposites, light and darkness, white and black. Everything's balanced on the equinox. The spring equinox basically is there's 12 hours in the day and 12 hours at night. God separated the light from darkness. In the Wiccan world, they join them together. So let's say that you have light and darkness. Let's put it in the terms of quantum computers. The switch is on or the switch is off. But in quantum computers, the switches on and off are fused together so that it's a hybrid bit. It's a fusion. It's a joining of 2 universes coming together, 2 dimensions. The 3rd dimension and the 4th dimension coming together, which makes, what's 4 and 3 add up to? 7. 7's a very big number in Masonry, especially. 7 heads of the beast is what it represents. But anyway, that's what the spring equinox is. It is the equality. Think about the equal sign. Have you ever seen somebody's Facebook page and they use for their picture the equal sign? You know what that is? They are for marriage equality. What that means is we think that even 2 men who kiss each other on the mouth should get married, and 2 women who kiss each other on the mouth should be able to get married as well. That's what the equal sign represents. It's marriage equality. If these people only knew the gods they were serving, and how they're going to have those gods laugh while they're burning in hell forever. I don't know if it would change some people's minds or not. Some people just like sin. But anyway, you have the spring equinox, which represents the equality, things fused together, sun and moon, yin and yang, male and female, sons of God, daughters of men, iron mixed with clay. That's what the equinox represents. Summer solstice. It's all about sun worship. The longest day of the summer. They meet at Stonehenge, and they face east, and they do it on this particular day. They are observing times. They are observing days and months and years. You have the autumn equinox, which is the opposite of the spring. You have the winter solstice, the longest night, the shortest day of the year in the northern hemisphere. And then if you turn that about, 45 degrees, you'll have what's called the cross quarter days. In between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, you have Imbolc, or Candlemas, or Groundhog Day. And here's what's interesting about Imbolc. Imbolc, or Candlemas, is about an awakening. Okay, because the winter solstice represents darkness. It is dark in wintertime in Festus, Missouri. It is cloudy most of the days. If you go to some places in Europe, they don't see the sun until sometime in April. But that's the way it is in the wintertime, and the sun is down a whole lot longer than it is up. By the way, you cannot have a summer and a winter solstice if you have a flat earth. You cannot have it. It is impossible for that to happen. Moving right along. Anyway, in between, the winter solstice represents the God who is dead and he's asleep. Remember what Elijah accused the prophets of Baal of? Because they were cutting themselves and they couldn't get the fire to come. And he said, maybe your God's asleep and he needs to be awakened. Bada boom, bada bing. That's exactly what's going on here. It's like these dragons, these watchtowers are all asleep and they need to be awakened so they can do the magic for you. Well, with winter solstice, when you get to Imbolc, Candlemas, February 2nd, the 33rd day of the year, Groundhog Day, you have an awakening. That's why at Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, every year, they bring this groundhog out, this little fat, furry rat, Punxsutawney Phil, they call him. And is he going to have an awakening? If he has an awakening, then there's going to be, winter's going to be shortened. If he doesn't, there's going to be 6 more weeks of winter. It's all this myth. It's all these fairy tales. It's all this tradition stuff that has no basis in reality. But it's based upon this idea that Candlemas, a cross-quarter day, is an awakening. There was a movie made called Groundhog Day. Bill Murray is this egotistical, hateful, spiteful, arrogant, lonely weatherman who keeps reliving February the 2nd, 33rd day of the year, over and over and over and over again until he has his awakening. And his awakening is that he gets to sleep with the gal in the movie. That's his awakening. He's essentially a god because he knows everything now and he can play instruments and he can speak French. And he did that because he kept reliving the days over and over and over and over again. Anyway, I got to move on. Imbolc, cross-quarter day. Beltane, May Day. It's where all the little adolescent girls dance around the great big giant maypole, weaving their little DNA strands around it. Okay? Wow. May 1st, 121st day of the year. That's 11 times 11. That was the day that Adam Weishaupt formed the Order of Perfectibilists, the Order of the Illuminati. Then you have Lughnasadh, and I don't remember what that's about. I have no idea. Then you have the fourth cross-quarter day that you have is between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, and it is called, well, let me tell you this, it is not called Samhain. And I have no idea why it's spelt Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain. Dan, have no idea. Celtic Druids who I believe the Druids were the practitioners of a religion that goes all the way back to the days of Ahab, because he had 400 prophets of the groves. And I think those prophets of the groves were the forerunners of Druidism, which was ensconced in Great Britain, Scotland, and Ireland. Those guys ruled. Those Druid priests who went to the groves, because that's where the gods were hanging out. They were hanging out in the groves. That's where the vegetation god, who was I reading about this morning? One of these false gods. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, he was a vegetation god. He was a god that took the form of a tree or took the form of a pumpkin. And the Druids would want a sacrifice on Samhain. And they would go to the village, they would go to the farms, and they would pick a house. And if you gave them, if they required an animal sacrifice, you said, okay, you can have it. If they wanted a human sacrifice, you had to give it to them. Because the idea is that we have to sacrifice something for this God that we worship, this God who lives in a tree. Who's hanging from a tree. We have to sacrifice something to him so that he can be appeased. That's witchcraft. That's offering your children unto Molech is what it is. But that's what they did. The idea of, some say it didn't come from there, some say it did, but the idea of trick or treat, it kind of matches what the Druids did, because if you gave them the sacrifice that they wanted, then your house was favored. And they would put a pumpkin and light a candle in it, and that was to show the spirits and the gods or whatever that your house was favored, and they wouldn't do anything bad inside of your house. And these people believed this doctrine. It's witchcraft, and it was bondage. But Samhain, if you look at it from the perspective of let's say Mesoamerica, like in Mexico and Central American places like that, they have what's called the Day of the Dead. And if you've ever been to Mexico, if you've ever been into a Mexico gift shop, my wife and I went to Matamoros a couple years ago, and we'll probably never go again. It's becoming one of the biggest drug cartel cities in Mexico. It's dangerous to go there now. But we went to Matamoros, Mexico, and we go to this little gift shop that we like called, I can't remember the name, but anyway, they have a really good restaurant, and their shrimp was amazing, and their steak was, anyway. And there's a part of the store where they sell, there's tons of Halloween-style objects that are reserved for October 31st. Skeletons and skulls and all of these things, just because it's the Day of the Dead. And the concept is, on this cross-quarter day of October 31st, Samhain, Day of the Dead, is that there is a veil between our world and the spirit world. Remember what I've been setting you up now for 2 hours on this one concept. I could have just said, Halloween's bad, I'll see you guys next week, okay? I thought I'd make it a little bit more lively and entertaining. In quantum computers, when the switch is on or off, everybody's fine. When the switch is both on and off at the same time, then what you have is a fusion of dimensions, a fusion of universes, a fusion of worlds. Heaven and earth collide every time there is a quantum bit function performed by this quantum computer. When the angels left their first estate, they came to this world and they took wives, all of which they chose, and they mated with them. Heaven and earth collided. Found out something new about the Masonic Lodge. This is in preparation for a future Watchman broadcast, that in the Masonic Lodge they have what's called the greater lights and the lesser lights, and that's based on Genesis chapter 1 and the fourth day of creation. The sun being the greater light, the moon being the lesser light. Masonic Lodge has 3 greater lights, which is the word of the Bible. King James Bible is one of those lights, and the square and the compass are the other 2 greater lights. And that makes me mad, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't need the square and the compass. I have a Bible that is the light of this world. But they have the 3 greater lights, and then they have 3 candles making a what kind of triangle it is. Anyway, they're making a triangle out of these 3 candles, and they call those the lesser lights. And the symbolism is that the greater lights, the 3 of them, join together with the lesser lights, the 3 of them. Sons of God, daughters of men, heaven and earth colliding together, parallel universes joining together. So you have on Samhain, on Halloween, it's a night when the spirit world, the veil between us and the spirit world is thin enough to allow a convergence of heaven and earth together. There will be rituals done this Saturday night on October 31st. There will be rituals of the blade and the chalice on October 31st by pagans, witches, warlocks, Satanists, people thinking they're just having fun. Those things will be done on October 31st. No one walks around the streets of Festus, Missouri, dressed like a vampire on any other day of the year. But they do on October 31st. No one walks around in a witch's costume. No one walks around like a zombie, the Dawn of the Dead. Nobody walks... what was the one that their Barack Obama costumes? No one walks around in a Barack Obama costume. That's a good way to get killed, I can tell you that. Except for on October 31st. And I'll be honest with everybody. I've told this before. When it comes to Halloween, man, I loved it. I loved trick-or-treating. I loved when I got to be a teenager and didn't trick-or-treat anymore. There was a guy in our church, he was a carpenter. He made me a coffin, one of them old style, and I would be in the coffin, and when the kids come up on the porch, I'd open the coffin lid and give them candy for Halloween. We used to, in this church, when I was young, we had Halloween parties. We all dressed up. We turned the Sunday school rooms into haunted houses. Oh my, what were we thinking? But that's what we used to do. And then you kind of educate yourself a little bit on what this day is. And then you're going, you know what? The unfruitful works of darkness really is something that I just don't want to be a part of anymore in my life. And Halloween is all about death and doom and gloom and killer people and people that suck blood and people that cast spells and ghosts and goblins and death and everything. And it's just not something that I really associate with in my life, whether it's October 31st or any other day of the year. It's just not something that I do. Now, I'm not as judgmental as some other people are. And I'm not saying they're wrong, and I'm not saying I'm wrong or right or whatever. God makes everybody different. I'm the guy that is going to educate you on what all this stuff means. Why is it on October 31st? It's because it represents an observance of times that the Wiccans and the pagans and the witches and the warlocks and all the sun worshipers and everybody, they all agree on this one day because it represents this number and it represents this observance and it represents the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And it represents the idea that they feel like that they can get closer to their God or the forces or the powers or whatever it is on these certain days more so than they could on any other day. And let me tell you about my belief, my religion. I believe I can call unto the Lord any day of the week, any day of the year, any time of the year, any time, day or night, facing any direction that I wanted to. I don't have to look at Mecca, which, by the way, all those mosques, whether they're here in this country, the ones I saw in Kenya, every one of them had 4 watchtowers on them, every one of them. And none of those mosques in Kenya were aligned with the street like all the other buildings were. They were aligned to face north, south, east, and west. Just like witches. What happened? Did I miss the music? Did I miss the cue? I missed the cue already. Let me get my music back going here. All right, I've run over a little bit. Just having fun. When it comes to October 31st, ask yourself what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay? I'm not your judge. I'm not anybody's judge. And I tell you what I am in favor of. There's a family, my church does this every year. They'll let the kids come up to their door, knock on the door. You know what they give them? They give them Bible tracts. One year they handed out copies. I made a video just for people handing stuff out on Halloween, and it was called For Real. And it went into Are Vampires Real? Are Witches Real? Some of these things that we talk about and how are they real? And of course the Bible has an answer for that, and it was a gospel message in that. I don't know if anybody's been saved as a result of it, but we're not told to guarantee the results. We're just told to hand out spread the seed of the Word of God. I'm not your judge on what you do Saturday, October 31st, 2015. God is your judge, which is probably, if you're doing right, then you don't have anything to worry about. But if you're doing something wrong and you let God be your judge, you better be glad that He's merciful, okay? So anyway, now you know why this day is such a big deal. Now you know why. It stems from this ancient idea that we must please the powers and the forces on this certain day, this certain way, and so on and so on. And that's not who I am anymore. All right? Hey, I think we made it through the whole broadcast without a flicker of video or anything like that. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate you praying for us. Keep it up. All right? I have not recorded a Watchman broadcast yet this week. I've just been overrun with one thing after another. And so I'll try to get it out as soon as I can. All right? Maybe next week. But you pray for me. Pray for David Toomey, member of our church. He really, really, really needs prayers. He thought that he had that cancer beat, and it showed up on his kidney. He's in the hospital now. You pray for him, all right? Hey, God bless you. I love you. We will see you next week.